Hey there. Making a video this weekend for someone on YouTube that I've been talking to for a number of years. Nice guy, atheist that I have gone back and forth with a number of times and different conversations just about the Bible or about life. And Tom is your name. Sorry it took so long for me to get this together, but Tom asked me a number of questions that and brought up a number of issues just about life, about the Bible that he wanted me to respond to, and just things that he said that I felt that I needed to respond to. It's also going to be a response to another atheist on YouTube who I can't unfortunately even mention his YouTube name because it's kind of gross, but this is also kind of a response for him as well because we were having a discussion about biblical things like prophecy and why the Bible is valid. So I'm also doing a response for him just to kind of do one video for both you because there's a little bit of overlap in the things that I'd be saying. So, uh, Tom, I wrote up over the last couple of weeks just kind of notes about how to answer some of the things that you talked about in your message that you sent me. Um, and the first one that I want to speak to is you talking about meaning. You said in your message that as an atheist, your life does have meaning. Um, since you moved away from God and walked away from belief in Him, that your life does have meaning. And earlier this week, I listened to I try to do a study of a sermon every week on Ravi Zacharias' website, rzim.org. And uh, yesterday, he was at an open forum in Johannesburg in Africa, and they were actually talking about the meaning of life. And what Ravi Zacharias said in that open forum is that for life to have meaning, it has to have the knowledge of truth. That just because I find meaning in something, it doesn't mean that there actually is meaning. It has to be within the confines of truth, or LSD in my veins could be seen as meaning too. Um, so meaning absolutely has to have the backing of what truth actually is about the true meaning of life, not just our opinions about what we think the meaning of life is, but about what the real true definition is. Because when you have 6 to 7 billion people on Earth, how many different ideas about what meaning really means or what meaning really is, how many different ideas are you going to get from, billions and billions of different people? And with no point of reference to measure, you know, how we come to the understanding of what the meaning of life really is, everyone's opinion about meaning is equally valid. So I don't think you can find ultimate meaning in an atheistic framework, in a framework where we're pretty much the source of meaning and of morality. Um, you mentioned that, your purpose in life, and another thing you talked about is purpose, that your purpose in life is to help people, and I commend you for that. I believe that's a genuine desire in your heart to help other people. Um, in one of my videos that I made to this pretty famous atheist on YouTube, um, on Euthyphro's Dilemma. It's a 20-minute video that I made. He talked about the same idea that we're the source of good and that we do good things because it helps other people. I pointed him to this verse in Romans that it's in Romans 1 that says that God has written His law in our hearts so that we're without excuse. That He's put this desire in us to do good things, and we can um, pursue that or we can go away from it. But the fact that we have that desire is because God has written His law in our hearts. And what I said to him, and what I'd caution you with as well, is that desire in your heart that God puts in you. Don't let yourself think that just because you have that desire that that means that it comes from you, or that good is defined by us, the ultimate meaning of what good really is, because God has written His law in our hearts, and it's because of that that we have the desire to pursue good things. But we also have a desire in ourselves to pursue the opposite. And in an atheistic framework where we are the source of pretty much everything, of morality, of our destiny, meaning, all of that, um, you can't really have an ultimate answer for it. And when you just look at humanity, I mean, you have human beings that have the propensity or the drive to do good things, but you also have human beings that are greedy, that are selfish, that are liars, murderers, rapists. People like that, I'm not going to ever claim that they are the source of morality. And we believe those things are wrong. A lot of us do, but at the same time, a lot of us apparently don't because we pursue that and we pursue doing awful things to one another. And because of that, I'm never going to accept that human beings can be the source of morality when we haven't even come to a consensus on it. We haven't even all agreed on these moral things, on these moral absolutes, if you want to call them that, because there are no absolutes in an atheistic framework to begin with. And you have different societies deciding different things about what's right and wrong, and it's just chaotic at best. Um, and unless you had that consensus in the first place, talking about morality is meaningless for human beings because at least any kind of morality that would actually be a constant or an everlasting trait, and that's what morality has to be for it to have any value. It has to be this constant, perfect trait, or it doesn't have any meaning. And how can a constant, everlasting, perfect trait come from imperfect, finite beings like ourselves? When we deteriorate and we die, how can we really be the source of something that's everlasting and something that's a constant? I don't think that we can claim that because of how many different opinions that we have from generation to generation. Um, and you brought up Confucius and this idea that you should treat others the way that you'd like to be treated. Again, I would just go back to the fact that God's written His law in our hearts, and I don't think Confucius was outside of that. That even before that was written down, in the New Testament when Jesus said that, um, God has still written His law in our hearts so that we know the right thing to do. We have a conscience. We know the right thing to do, but sometimes we deviate from that and we make the choice to go the other way. Um, and it's because of that morality only makes sense if God is the source of it. If there's a source outside of ourselves that can claim that can give us moral laws, that can give us the ultimate idea of what good and evil really is. And moving on from this, the next thing that you talked about was another person named Tom in England. I think you were saying we were talking about issues of respecting life and how we all value life. And I guess before I should go back to a point that I was going to make that I didn't actually write down about the value of life and how Tom wanted to end his life. But when you think about meaning, or when you think about the value of life, and then this is kind of a response to the other person that I'm making this video for, because he and I were having a conversation yesterday about he thought that it was kind of an idiotic idea that I brought to him when I said that if you have two people, one of them says that murder is wrong, and the other says, what the heck, it doesn't matter what I do with my life, I can do whatever I want, and if I get joy or pleasure out of killing someone else, then who the heck are you to tell me that I'm wrong in believing that? And I said that because of that, you have two differing opinions, and humans are supposed to be the source of morality, so they cancel each other out. I mean, you can't really say that anything is ultimately wrong if we are supposed to be the source of morality, and we contradict each other. And he thought that was an idiotic idea. But the reality is that we don't all respect human life the same way. Whether it's racism, which is still alive today. Not, at least not in America as much as it was 100 or so years ago, and even 1960s, 1970s. But it's still alive today, where we treat other people as inferior because of their skin color or their ethnicity. Um, you have abortion, which I'm going to get to later, something that you, Tom, said about abortion. But we don't respect human life in that sense, um, and it is human life. And I've gone off on that in my video on Euthyphro's Dilemma, if you want to watch that, about why human life before it's born actually does have value. But we say that human life doesn't have value. There was even an example that I brought up of after birth abortion, where if a child is born with a defect, or is autistic, or something that would cause um, more strain on the life of the family of that child, that it should be legitimate to end that life. These are arguments that human beings make. So how in the world can we really say that we all believe that life has value and that life, ought to be lived? We have so many examples, even today, that we do not all respect human life equally. So we can't be the source of why life has value, or be the ones that determine whether or not it does, because we don't all agree that it does. But going to this example of, we talked about doctor-assisted suicide, and this Tom guy in England that was going through severe physical pain and wanted to end his life. Um, I'm not going to pretend to know what that's like, to go through the amount of physical pain that he obviously did in wanting to end his life. But there are examples of a number of people who have gone through similar things, and one that I want to bring up is a very famous Christian woman. Her name's Annie J. Flint. She had severe arthritis to the point where her hands were just crippled and looked almost mangled her whole life, and she was bedridden and had horrible bed sores almost her whole life. But she wrote this hymn, and it's a very famous Christian hymn. It's called "He Giveth More Grace," and I'm not going to sing it for you because I can't sing, but I'm just going to read it. He says, or she writes, "He giveth more grace as our burdens grow greater. He sendeth more strength as our labors increase. To added afflictions he addeth his mercy. To multiplied trials his multiplied peace. When we have exhausted our store of endurance, when our strength has failed and the day is half done, when we reach the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's full giving has only begun. His love has no limits, His grace has no measure, His power no boundary known unto men. For out of His infinite riches in Jesus He giveth and giveth and giveth again." To have someone who is experiencing extreme pain her whole life to still praise God and give Him glory in her life is an amazing thing. And it shows that, yes, there are trials and severe trials that we go through in life, but we still have the option of making the most of it. And how many lives through Annie Flint have been encouraged, are numberless. I just looking on YouTube, I looked up this hymn and people that had sing it and had sung it on YouTube, and hundreds of thousands of views on these, and comments just saying, this gave me so much hope and helped me persevere through what I'm going through. You have examples of that where people go through pain. They go through it for a reason. It's not without meaning, without purpose. Even though it may not seem like it. And she's a prime example of that. And I know that I'm encouraged when I see someone that has gone through so much more physical pain than I have, but still manages to retain that faith in God. It's an encouragement to a lot of people, and I think that you can you can see purpose in pain and that there is a reason for it. Um, but again, I mean, if I don't know what I would do in that situation, if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't know how I would deal with it. But I do know that it wouldn't change the morality of the situation just because it would be a more difficult situation. Um, the difficulty of it doesn't change whether or not it's moral. It just changes the ability for you to make the right choice. It doesn't change what the right choice would actually be. Um, and moving on from that, just you mentioned abortion. I guess I mentioned it first, and we got to talking about that. And something that you said about abortion is that you don't personally think that it's a nice thing to do. Is how you kind of worded it in your message. And you went on to say this, that we make life, not God. And that kind of struck me when you said that, to be honest, because when I think of just the nature of creating life, of that union between a man and a woman where they come together to make a baby, what what I see is this. Um, I try to imagine the incredible coincidence it would have to be without God in the framework, without God in the situation, to create a human being, a male human being, would be incredible enough. To have that come about without God through the process of evolution would be amazing. There's just this incredible coincidence. But even more so, and even more unlikely, is to create another being that complements the other, that has components that, when they're brought together, they have the ability to create life. It's like there's this power outlet right next to me as I was thinking about this, where you have this outlet that, when connected, with an extension cord or something that plugs in my laptop like it is now, you have something that was designed to take something into itself and, because of that, generate power, or in the example of human beings, uh, reproduce life. um, there is just no possible way that came together without a designer behind it. So I think to say that we make life, not God, is to cast aside the incredible nature of life, and and just the fact that we create things every day. I mean, we create power outlets, we create laptop chargers that go into those power outlets. We create things with our own intelligence every day that are nothing compared to the human body, and nothing compared to the way that we were fashioned and the way that we were made. So when I see examples like that, we may reproduce life, but the things that were put in place for us to have the ability to do that are not the product of anything without a creator. And the evidence for that is just incredibly clear. And even if you hold to evolution, even if you say that was the process by which it came to be, natural selection, that still doesn't disprove that God was behind that. Even if you believe in evolution 100%. John Lennox, I got a couple of his books recently, and I'm reading through them. But something that he has said in one of his videos that I've watched on YouTube is to say that you have to choose between either science or God for the creation of the universe, or the creation of humanity, is like saying you have to choose between Henry Ford or internal combustion for the existence of a car. Science is the internal combustion, is the engine by which God created life. They aren't distinct from one another. It's the way that God created life. Um, but when you have this complexity, and you have the fact that we ourselves attempt to create things with our intelligence. But another video on YouTube that I watched recently was this robot that was made in Japan, and you see it try to walk up these stairs, and boom, it just falls over and just biffs it on the ground, on the pavement. And I commented on there, what a great proof for God's existence that the culmination of so much human intelligence, where they're working, for years, no doubt, to try to create this, can't create anything like the human body. With our intelligence, we can't create anything close to the human body, even though we attempt to. Um, but how much intelligence has to be behind the intelligence of someone like us? And it's not this. I don't know why it's treated like this just nonsensical argument. To say that we were the product of a designer. I mean, when we see design in almost everything that we do. I mean, I'm in my apartment right now, and I can give you dozens of examples of things that were created with human intelligence that I would never say came about by chance, but they're so much less complex than we are. It can't reason or make videos in response to messages on YouTube. It can't. Things in my apartment can't do that, um, or can't even reason about how they came to be. But when you can do that, it points so clearly to a creator, and it's not nonsensical. It's just common sense to see how we with our intelligence create things, and to just see logically that we also have to be the product of intelligence when we ourselves create things with our own intelligence that can't have any other explanation. Um, and just moving on from that, I think with abortion, if you believe that it seems like you believe that it's wrong. Um, Life does have intrinsic worth and value, and the very fact that you yourself think that it's something that ought not to be done. I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth saying that, but it seems like from your message that's what you're saying, that you don't really agree that abortion should happen, but you're not, you want a woman to have the choice to do whatever she wants with her own body. Um, First of all, I'd wonder how far you would take that. Um, just because someone has the ability to do things with their body, it doesn't automatically justify that action. I mean, how do you differentiate between her, because she has her own body, killing the child inside of her with murdering someone on the street? I mean, she's using her body and she has control over her own body. Um, that doesn't justify what she's doing. Just because it's her body and she should choose whatever she wants to do with it, that can justify absolutely anything. I have my own body, so I should be able to do whatever I desire to do, if that's really the argument. Um, but there are limitations to what we do, and with abortion, I thought of this last night. Just a thought that came to my mind, that the argument for abortion or things like gay marriage, which is a completely different video, and I've made a number of them. The argument that's made is that well, we all have equal value, so we all should um, have the same rights to do whatever in the world we want to do. The thought that came to my mind yesterday was, the fact that we all have our the fact that we're all equally valuable as human beings doesn't mean that all of our choices are equally moral. Um, and in terms of gay marriage or abortion, like we're bringing up now, you have to understand that just because we're all equally created as human beings, it doesn't mean that everything we do is justified just because we're all equal. And it seems like that's where the argument goes. And one of the last things I want to speak to is going to be the longest part of this video. Um, and wow, this is already 24 minutes. But something that you said about the credible evidence of the Bible, and that you don't think that it exists, you don't think it's really there. I definitely wanted to speak to that, and this is definitely for the other YouTube user that I'm making a video for, because this is an argument that I get a lot from atheists, is that there's no evidence whatsoever for a belief in the Bible. Um, and that just that astounds me, to be honest. That people honestly make that argument that there there is just no reason, no intelligence behind a Christian's decision to believe that Jesus Christ is the Savior of the world and to believe that the Bible is true, is the source of truth. There's absolutely no evidence. It's like making the argument that there are cards on a table. One says Islam, one says Christianity, one says atheism, and the Christian just goes, yeah, okay, I'll go ahead and pick Christianity, just for no reason at all, and it's completely untrue. And knowing how much even today um, Christians are murdered for their faith, they don't give up their life for something that they don't believe in and don't have reason to believe in. I wouldn't give up my life for something that I had no reason to believe was real. I wouldn't, because my life has value. Um, and I wouldn't just trade it for some belief that I have no reason to actually hold to. But there are a number of reasons that I'm going to list here about why there is evidence for the Bible and why billions of people across the span of human history have believed that it's true. Um, the first is the historical accuracy of the Bible. And a lot of this is said in a video that Ravi Zacharias made called Why the Bible. It's on YouTube. And I'm really just going to be repeating a lot of what he said, and he's a lot more intelligent than I am, so I would point you to that video to look for that on YouTube and watch it if you haven't already. But in that video, he mentions Bruce Metzger, who's this biblical scholar, one of the most famous biblical scholars in the world, who made the statement through his research and through his study that when you take the 20,000 lines of the New Testament, just the New Testament itself, that it's safe for any scholar to say there's at least a 99.6% verified accuracy in the statements that it makes. So when you have that, and when you have that accuracy that's so much more affirmed than any other ancient text that we have, you have a reason to trust the things that the Bible says when it, in everything so far that we can verify, um, has been said to be true. So when it says that Jesus actually existed, you have a reason to trust what it says because it's been right about everything else. You have a reason to say he existed. That's different than saying that you have a reason to believe that he was supernatural. The supernatural element of the way the Bible was written and the prophetic truths that we see in the Bible is proof of its supernatural nature and a reason to believe that that there is more than just the natural framework, and that we can actually see examples of supernatural situations in the way the Bible was formed and the prophecies that it gives. And so the first thing, I'm just going to mention a few prophecies in the Old Testament that have come true exactly the way that the Bible predicted they would. The first that I want to talk about is the biblical prophecies that were fulfilled by other nations, and this first one is about Babylon. Um, in 609 BC, the Israelites were taken over by the Babylonians. The prophecy that was given in Jeremiah 25, that was given sometime between 626 and 586 BC, said that the Babylonians would come and take over Israel for 70 years. They would be captives of Babylon for 70 years, that exact amount that it said. So that was given sometime between 626 and 586. 609 BC, the Babylonians wiped out the Assyrians and took the Israelites captive. In 539 BC, the Persians came in, led by Cyrus, to take over the Babylonians and eventually allowed the Jewish people to return to their homeland. In Jeremiah 25, you have two prophecies that were fulfilled. The first was saying that, that 70-year period, exactly 70 years, the Israelites would be in captivity, and the Babylonians would eventually, after that 70 years, the Israelites would be freed. also that the Babylonians would be attacked and taken over, which they were, by the Persians. So you have two that were given 70 years at least before they actually came to be, and predicted in such a way that's so clearly given by God, because of the fact that how in the world would you know or be able to predict exactly 70 years before something happens? That's evidence of the truth in the Bible. You have another one about Egypt in Ezekiel 29:15 that says that Egypt would recover from a desolation that many believe was Babylon's attack about 2,600 years ago, and that Egypt would never rule over another nation. This prophecy was given about 593 BC. Um, and it came true that from that point on, Egypt never ruled over another nation. That was what the prophecy was, and it hasn't. Uh, so again, I mean, how in the world do you predict something like that when Egypt was this major power in the world? How could you actually say that it would never again in human history rule over another nation? And it hasn't. Um, to be able to affirm that can't be explained by any other way except supernatural means, that God told them that because he understands the future. And it's also obviously a proof of God's existence. Now, the very last one is in Daniel 8, and it's another one that Ravi Zacharias gives in his video, Why the Bible. But it's predicting the coming of Alexander the Great. Daniel was written in the late 500s before Christ, and he gives this prophecy. It was in a discussion with Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel was interpreting a vision that Nebuchadnezzar had that said that someone from Greece would come and establish this great kingdom, that he would have this conquest and establish this great kingdom, and that after that it would split into his kingdom would split into four, and from that split into two, and from that split into one empire. And when you put that, again, Daniel's written in the late 500s before Christ, in the 300s when Alexander the Great began his conquest, you see that Alexander made this great empire. After that, his empire was cut off and divided into four nations that were given to his four generals. Those four blended into the Seleucid Empire, and trying to think what the other one was. Anyway, Ravi Zacharias mentions the two that it split into, and then those two split into or merged into the Roman Empire. But to be so specific about prophecy that way is another affirmation to me of the prophetic nature of the Bible. So those are the examples of the prophecy. But you also have, it's just as in relation to Jesus, you also have extra biblical people who affirm that Jesus actually existed. You have Tacitus, you have Marabar Serapion, I can't even pronounce that. But just in things that they said, Tacitus said, consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations called Christians, from the name Christ of its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of the of Pontius Pilate, and a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out only in Judea, and he goes on from that, but saying that Christ existed and that Pontius Pilate actually killed him. And I'm going to post the link just for the sake of time, not to read through these other ones, but there's extra biblical proof that Jesus actually existed, and this is a link that I'm going to post to that. So there is overwhelming evidence that the Bible is true. You can look at a number of examples of that. And when you look at the reliability of the New Testament, in another link that I'm going to post that talks about the existing copies of the New Testament and the years between the original and the earliest surviving copies of the New Testament compared to um, the Iliad or writings by Aristotle, you see 24,000 existing copies of the New Testament, 643 of the Iliad, Aristotle's writings, 49, Caesar has 10, and we trust some of those other ones as being accurate, as being historically accurate, like about Caesar. Um, why don't some people give the exact same validity to the Bible when it has so much more, so many more copies and so much more verified, statements that are given in it? Um, it's slightly hypocritical, but that's really the last thing that I wanted to say. A lot of very very big topics, and I'm sure this video is over 30 minutes now, but um, one last thing that I guess I'll respond to is you saying that once God heals an amputee, that that will change your belief. Um, when you look at the way the Bible was written, and I've mentioned this to the other person that this video is for, you don't need an example of an amputee being healed to believe what the Bible says. It's not a necessity to have that. Um, because in the way that the Bible is written, and have repeated this a lot, but you have this book. This is another thing that Ravi Zacharias says in his video, Why the Bible? You have this book that was written over a 1,500-year period by nearly 40 different authors that carries this story all the way from generation to generation, this common story that fulfills prophecy, that predicts the coming of Jesus Christ, which, there are a number of other prophecies that Christ actually fulfilled. um, when you have that, it's just this incredible way that the Bible was written, and that it's not this coincidence in the way that these stories piece together, like the one that you watched about Abraham that I made. That you have this book that was written over 1,000 years before Christ came, where Abraham gave this was given this word by God when he was going to sacrifice his son Isaac, that God said, "Don't do it. I myself will provide." And then over 1,000 years after that, you have the Gospels, which show that Christ was the sacrifice that God was talking about 1,000 years earlier, that only He would know was actually going to come to be. Um, it's incredible, and it's because of evidence that I believe in the Bible. It's because there is evidence that I have reason to trust it, and again, I don't just arbitrarily decide. Christianity, that sounds like a fun word. I'm just going to pick up that card and believe it. Billions of people have believed because we have reasons, very legitimate reasons, to believe in the Bible and believe what it says. Um, so that's how I'd answer a lot of your questions or statements in that message. And again, sorry for the overwhelming length of this, probably the longest video I've ever made. But yeah, feel free to respond, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation. And again, sorry that it took me so long to get this out, but as you can see, it was a pretty loaded response that I wanted to do. So thanks for watching, and I hope this answered a few of the questions that you had, or a few of the statements that you obviously think about, and issues that you ponder day to day. So thank you for watching, and hope you have a good day. Thanks.